Well, good morning, everyone. It's very early Sunday.
Very early.
We are standing in the news radio station 970 AM, WFLA. I am with Mark Govan. We're about to go live on the air.
Good morning.
Yeah, it is a good morning.
Yeah, it's true.
Beautiful outside. We're about to get a little tour here. He's going to show us before we get live, so I'm just going to kind of walk and follow him. He's going to tell me stories.
Absolutely.
17 years.
23 years here.
23. I only missed it by 6. That's
Yes.
better than how many anniversaries I missed.
Yes,
All
that
right.
is true.
Well, let's see here. It's nice.
These are recording studios. I don't know if you can see.
Yeah.
So if I want to record a spot for somebody on the air, I could go in there and record this a live spot.
Sure.
And we are currently in the WFLA section of the building.
Okay. My plant, for sure. Loaded with...
This is probably going to be locked at this side over here. Who will find out though?
I'm thinking maybe this would be important to have right here. I think I need this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to Florida Gardening. Now your host, Mark Govan.
And a good morning and welcome to Florida Gardening. I am your host, Mark Govan. Glad to be here on this beautiful Sunday morning. Hey, today, special day today, we have a guest in studio. My guest is John Perry. John is the president and founder of BioGreen USA, and of course Green County Fertilizer, and of course the author of Lawncology. Good morning, John.
Well, good morning. It is wonderful to be here.
You are used to getting up this early in the morning, I take it.
Every day.
Every day.
Every day.
Wow.
There's no rest for the weary.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because we need you wide-eyed and open this morning to help answer some questions about fertilization and maybe some of the misconceptions people have about fertilizer.
Yes.
John is a full disclosure, the Green County Fertilizer is a fertilizer I actually use in my business. And we had switched over from a granular operation, that's putting down little pellets, to a liquid-based fertilizer program. Oh, I would say about
5 years ago.
6 years ago at this point. So it's not something we just changed yesterday. So this is something going on for quite a while.
Right.
And John, tell us, first of all, tell us a little bit, it says you're author of Lawncology. What is Lawncology?
That is a great question. So a few years ago, I started taking a lot of the techniques that I use from years of lawn care and developing fertilizer and kind of putting it into a method that anybody can simply understand about the way soils function, how plants function inside certain soil conditions, how we can look at issues in lawns or in your flowers or anything, that diseases that would actually be sort of naming nutrient deficiencies. So sort of a different way of diagnosing problems, and ultimately it comes back to the total nutrition that's being fed. So the Lawncology blog and what I speak to on my YouTube channel on Lawncology as well is about that. It's about industry things, shares a little bit about the products we make, but for the most part it is educating anyone about soil science and plant science together to have kind of a homogeneous unit.
So you're looking at least explaining to people how fertilizer reacts not only to the plant, but within that plant itself,
Yes.
To make the process go quicker and to allow the plant to actually absorb the nutrients. Sometimes it does not matter, of course, how much fertilizer is in the soil if the plant can't accept that
That's
fertilizer.
exactly right. Yeah, and there's a lot that goes into that too, and depending on how in depth anybody wants to go, but cationic exchange plays a role, pH plays a role, moisture plays a role, organic matter plays a role. There are all these different things that are required for that root system to be able to take up and use those nutrients that are applied, and it's very simple for those to get locked out.
Now, most people would probably think that the use of a granular fertilizer versus a liquid fertilizer, a granule is going to last so much longer than a liquid-based fertilizer. Well, what's the misconception there?
Sure, yeah, so, at the end of the day, nutrition, obviously, it's about the nutrients applied. Now, it can come in different forms. So we do have these liquid, we do have granular. Now, a lot of the granulars that are being used are designed to be controlled released, and that means that there is a coating or an element that slows down the feeding of that particular nutrient. Typically, in this case, we're just going to talk about nitrogen. So a lot of granulars are designed to give kind of an extended length, and also somewhat of a buffer from doing things wrong. So
Sure.
applying granular is traditionally, it's very safe, it's easy, you're not really going to mess it up unless you leave a pile of it in the middle of the lawn, which you don't want to do. Not a good idea. Follow the bag, follow the instructions, that's very important. With liquids, you have a couple of forms of uptake. There's a part of it that goes directly into the leaf blade, and then you get a much more even coverage, so it's more effective on the system as a whole. So rather than having one pellet over here and one over here, we've now covered the entire system. So the nutrient will still transfer through the soil, microbial activity will still use what it needs to use, everything will go through the roots, but you've also gotten that first initial foliar feeding. So that too, there's quite a few different controlled release items out there. So you can have liquids that last as long as mini granulars, not some of these polymer coated that'll
Sure.
go, 3-4 months. But it's just sort of a more effective delivery system. And oftentimes what I like to talk about is you can think about a plant similar to if you were feeding fish. Okay, the roots are going to search for the nutrient, and if we can have that in a soluble form and it's in a liquid and that starts to pass through, the roots will follow the water and take things up on a deeper level, rather than feeding from the surface and having them all come up to eat and getting that shallow root system.
So kind of like a koi where you throw the bunch of food into the water, all the fish come to the top of the water to feed.
That's right.
That's what granular fertilizer applications kind of do. The more you put at the surface, the root structure of that plant, whether that be a turf grass or any type of vegetable plant or tree or shrub,
Sure.
those roots will come back up to the top, searching for that nitrogen source that had found there before.
That's
now,
right.
Now, what happens if you cut off that source of nitrogen at the top?
That's actually really interesting. So typically, a plant will correct itself. Look, plant roots follow water, but they also follow nutrition, and oftentimes, because not everything can be utilized that's being fed from the surface, there's a lot of material that's just extra. And it'll start to go down and drain through a soil system to a point where it kind of gets stuck. And sometimes in agriculture that's called a salt pan. It can be called a nutrient pan. There's all these different things. But at a certain level, things kind of start to get stuck. But at some point, the roots will try to go that direction. And they're going to try to drive down. And that typically happens in, say, times of drought, because roots need to stay cool and they chase the water.
Sure.
So that's essentially, like, the best way to get a root to go down is to stress it out.
To actually stop the watering.
Yeah, just for a little bit. and then you fill it up and let things kind of go drain back down and just get that root to just trace and follow the water.
And what's so important in what you said, and I don't know if you have even keyed upon it, is to make sure that if you are applying the water, that you're putting down enough water that will penetrate the turf grass to a certain level.
That's right.
The example being is that I have a lot of people say, I water every day for 15 minutes.
That doesn't do anything.
It just enough to wet the surface and to run that water off into the street. Oh, I'm done now.
Yes.
Versus the hour that they should be watering to put at least an inch of water down at a time to penetrate the soil surface down to 6, 8, 9 inches in
Yes.
depth to allow the roots to start seeking that moisture where it should be.
Correct. And really, the soil is a sponge, and you really need to think about it like a sponge. If you have a tub of water and a dry sponge and you toss that thing in there, it floats. It doesn't absorb the water. Once it's wet, though, it pulls more water into itself. So if you think about that in a moisture level, you want to keep things moist, not wet. And every time you water, there's a better opportunity for water to be uptaken by the roots.
Wow. Different people think of fertilizers, foliar fertilizers in different ways. And I'm wondering if there are people out there that are currently on a granular program that are thinking, well, there's no way that your liquid program can put more into the ground at any one time than a granule program can. And for the most part, they're probably correct, right?
Well, yeah, there actually wouldn't be a reason. So in the programs that we design, we don't go anywhere near the levels that are being suggested that would be typically applied on a bag of fertilizer. And a lot of that is just because it's so much more effective, much more effective.
Well, we just got this, I think I mentioned this last week. This is from the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services about a recent change in the urban turf fertilizer rule, increasing the nitrogen application rate up to 2 pounds per 1,000 square feet in both the spring and the fall.
Yes.
Now, of course, people that are not on a liquid program such as what you have done or commercially what I have done, this is their only option.
That's right.
And if they can, when you continue feeding your lawn fertilizer, your lawn continues to look for that fertilizer, does it not?
Mm-hmm.
And it keeps looking and looking because it doesn't seek out those nutrients deeper in the soil.
That's right. The biggest problem that I see right now, where there are fertilizer ordinances all across the country.
Sure.
This is not new. Now, Florida's are different because it's different county to county. There's places that do different things. There's not really uniformity yet. Where I tend to have my biggest disconnect is that we've done nothing to lower the actual nutrient loads. And in fact, they're being recommended to be increased. And now, if the issue is about lowering the pollutants and that non-source point nitrogen and phosphorus that's getting into
The water system, sure.
Yeah. Why are we putting out more?
At any one time.
Yeah, at any time. If you can take a program and say, guys, rather than do 6 pounds a year and have that be over 3 feedings or how it's being recommended now, why don't we cut that rate down to, say, a half a pound every other month? We do a 3 pound minimum per year. You can grow beautiful turf on that. Most of our programs, the ones that we've designed for many companies around the state, use less than 2 pounds of nitrogen a year. So
Per year.
Per year.
Yes, per year.
Yes.
Some people down even to 1 pound of fertilizer, which I heard at one of our last meetings that we had.
Yeah, that's about, you're looking at 1/8 of a pound per application.
And without any difference in coloration or health of the turf as well. What they do not get is they do not get the lawnmower people coming to their lawn to cut off that beautiful new growth that granular fertilizer put down.
Yes.
They still get the green without the growth.
That's right. And I know that, most homeowners love being farmers, is what I understand now. They love to bale hay.
Sure.
That's their favorite thing to do every other day when you're applying this much nitrogen. Because, the hay market for St. Augustine right now is just fantastic. So, we take that method to say, hey, we're not growing a crop here. We're growing beautiful grass. And that doesn't mean that it has to grow super fast, because if we can slow down the top growth, we actually encourage that subsoil root growth.
And there's nothing worse to me than cutting a blade of grass in half or cutting 3/4 of that blade of grass off at any one time, because you're number one, you're hurting the grass, and number two, you're eliminating all that nutrition that you just fed that plant.
That's right. That's right. A plant's function is to take whatever it can and grow as fast as possible and reproduce and move just like anything else on the planet. It has a role. And if there is an excess in the environment, it has to throw off a function in order to compensate for that item. So we get this tremendous surge growth at certain times of year. And for what? If the color's great, if you've got it growing and you want to have a nice fresh cut grass, you can have that, but you don't have to cut 6 inches off every time. It's silly.
Or the person that you're paying to cut the grass.
Yeah, that's right.
He won't be mad at you anymore.
No, that's true. Yeah, and really, wear and tear on equipment. When we talk professionally with people, that's one of the biggest things they notice is that they're not bogging down and breaking things like they would because it's less stressful even on equipment.
Sure.
That's a big deal.
I'm talking with John Perry. He's the president and founder of BioGreen USA and, of course, Green County Fertilizer. Also, he is the author of Lawncology. We're going to be talking more about fertilizer and nutrition for not only our turf grass, but for all of our plants and vegetables. We're going to continue the conversation coming up. So stand by. Of course, you are listening to Florida Gardening.